Of the Body Condemned, Chapter 4, Salve. By Lady of Rosefire and Sparks writes. Essek wakes. Content tags for graphic depictions of violence, execution, road hauling, torture, aftermath of torture, flogging, hanging, strangulation, gibbets, vomiting, urination, fighting, rescue missions, crying, healing, hurt comfort, hair petting, nightmares, emotional hurt comfort, want dislocations, bruises, trauma, near-death tenderness, physiotherapy, and hand-holding. Once in the night, Essek wakes on the noose again, choking and gasping and unable, at first, to haul in enough air. His toes cannot find ground, his hands cannot loosen the rope pulled tight around his neck, and he cannot breathe. He cannot breathe. His bladder voids itself, and his legs kick wildly at nothing, and his chest tightens as though his ribs are trying to rip free of the flesh around them. In his ears is the roaring of the crowd and the rushing of his blood. He's going to die here, ignoble and pathetic and afraid, suspended in the air for all of Xhorhas to watch, to see, to mock.
Essek!
It is, somehow, Jester's voice. Hers is not the voice he expected to hear on his deathbed. The dying mind, he presumes, must conjure the most irrational of hallucinations as it shuts down piece by tortured piece.
Essek, it's okay. I have tea and a potion. Let's try the potion first.
He does not want whatever poison they plan to pour into him, but the hand at the back of his head is firm, and he is weak. A glass vial touches his lips. He refuses to open them. But instead of pain, instead of someone holding his nose shut until he gasps, he hears Jester again.
Will you open your eyes?
He does.
Please?
He finds her staring down at him on the brink of tears, tired, bloody, a potion bottle clutched in one hand.
Jay.
He coughs.
What?
It's me. I promise. I gave you a cupcake that one time, remember? And we tried to get you to go in the hot tub and kept staring at your feet.
Her voice breaks. They had flogged the skin off the bottoms of his feet at some point, until he was bloody and sobbing because his throat was too raw to scream anymore. And then he hadn't been able to walk when they had dragged him through the city, and he opens his mouth. The potion is herbal, familiar, and soothes his throat on the way down. Jester gives him the tea after it, in small, honey-sweet sips, while he is too tired to protest being hand-fed. She
okay.
whispers.
I'm right here. Go back to sleep.
She runs cool fingers through his hair and across his forehead, again and again, in a steady rhythm, slowly and gently, careful not to scrape him with her nails. She touches him as he imagines one might to comfort a child, and his chest tightens with all her unfamiliar tenderness. And yet his breath eases just a bit. He closes his eyes. When he wakes again, it's Caleb by his bedside, and the whole room smells green. Essek groans, closing his eyes against the pain of the dim light. The dark of the dungeons had not been good for his eyes. The ceaseless glare of the sun when they hung him out to burn had been even worse. He does not know what to call the light in here at first. That would require him to open his eyes and check. There is the sound of shuffling. One person rising, another approaching. Someone lays a cool hand across his face, and he flinches, an animal panicking sound breaking from his raw throat. Jester's potion had not worked then. Or had not worked enough. Whatever spell the hand's owner cast soothes his eyes, though, along with the last of the pounding in his head. It also leaves him all that much more aware of the hurt in every other part of his body. And yet, it is better than it was. His shoulders do not feel so wrong. He can move his jaw. His world is no longer entirely pain. Only mostly. Slowly, Essek opens his eyes again. Caduceus smiles down at him so gently that Essek cringes from it.
I'm sorry we couldn't do more for you last night.
He pauses then, for long enough to let his words sink in. Then he settles back on his heels and continues.
I'd like to start with your back, if that's alright. I couldn't close that up, and I'm worried about it getting reinfected.
Essek does not want to think about the state of his back. He wants to sleep, or to run, or perhaps both. He's not entirely sure. Anything is better than being reminded that he is trapped in this raw shell, this wreck of a body, hurting and vulnerable.
Here, let me help you.
Essek shakes his head. Even that hurts, although less than he had expected. He digs the heels of his hands into the floor, noting the pain of new skin rather than torn, and tries to lever himself up. He makes it 6 inches before his strength gives out. Caduceus catches him before his head can strike the floor.
Easy now. There's nothing wrong with needing a little support.
He bristles, for all the good it does him. Then he lets Caduceus draw him upright, leaning him against his chest like a sick child or an old man. The shoulder beneath his chin smells of mushrooms and earth after rain. He focuses on that, and not on how his stomach roils as Caduceus helps him out of his borrowed shirt. The flare of pain in his shoulders, the expectation of more to follow. No one is sitting behind him, and so no one sees the mess of Essek's back before it is healed, except for Caduceus as he looks over Essek's shoulder.
Ah, good. You're doing nicely.
Caduceus informs him as though there is anything nice about this.
Here we go. This is going to itch for a second.
It does not itch. It feels as though the whole of his skin tries to walk across his back. Essek shudders and swallows over and over as his empty stomach roils. When it is done, his back has skin on it again. Most of the dried blood flakes away with the lichen that seems to come with Caduceus' healing magic. Essek drags his head up.
Why?
He rasps.
Why is your back healing?
Why?
He repeats, shaking his head, stopping abruptly when it makes the nausea flare. It hurts to speak, but he has to try.
Why did you?
Caduceus sets his hands against Essek's tender ribs.
That's obvious, isn't
Jester comes to sit by him, taking his aching hand in both of hers.
We're your friends.
Kill you
Essek wheezes.
too.
They can try, Yasha replies. All of them gathered while Caduceus worked. They sit or stand in a loose circle, the 2 clerics at his side, watching. Witnesses to his suffering, his helplessness. The thought curdles in his unsteady stomach. He resists the urge to bury his face in the crook of Caduceus' neck. He is no child to think they cannot see him just because he cannot see them. Jester cups his cheek with a cool hand, spreading a mint chill through the bruises and broken skin.
It's gonna be okay. We are good at avoiding people who are angry with us. It's gonna be okay.
Essek watches them all for a moment, and then makes a noise that might be close to a laugh, gurgling in his throat. It sends him coughing, chest heaving, face screwed up against the pain of the movement.
All mad.
He manages, when he can breathe again. And Luxon isn't that a luxury after days of hanging, breathless, and choking? The simple act of being able to fill up his lungs.
Probably.
Ford shrugs. His gentle pat on the shoulder pours magic into Essek's body. It's a little thing, but it's enough to soothe his chest for now.
But we've done alright so far.
Besides, Essek, you're our friend.
Jester adds. Their magic fills him. Mint and moss and sea foam. And Essek thinks he might drown in it. It tickles his throat and his lungs and makes his ribs ache.
Water, please.
He rasps. He cannot hold the cup on his own. They have fixed the breaks in his hands, but the muscles and tendons are still damaged, tender. He almost drops the cup before Caduceus studies it for him. It is harder to accept the assistance in waking, but he is so thirsty he thinks his throat might crack open and bleed if he does not drink something. He swallows his pride along with the water.
How long was I there?
He asks, finally.
In that cage.
From what we can tell, a few hours or so.
Caleb rubs at his arms through the sleeves of his coat.
The guard we spoke to said it had been that morning. That you were taken.
Hours. The room spins and Essek groans involuntarily. If not for Caduceus's hands on him, he might have slumped to the floor. Hours. It had felt like an age hanging there. Weeks, months perhaps, suspended in that cage and dying, choking, burning. He isn't sure how to process the eternity he experienced, how to press the length of it down into a few short hours. His stomach twists, heaves, and he nearly loses the meager quantity of water he'd managed to choke down.
I thought...
He begins and then swallows the rest of the words and the bile rising in his throat. They do not need to know about this, about his suffering in the jaws of a device he helped create.
I am keeping you from your work.
Would you like some time alone?
Caduceus asks. His gaze runs Essek through, and so he refuses to meet it.
I'd like to see you healed a little more.
Do as you like.
He knows, with distance, that it could not have been days in that cage. The sun never set, after all. But the thought of it still makes his hands shake and his breath catch in his throat. He could lose himself to wondering and what-ifs, but they keep him here in this tower room. Essek almost cannot watch Jester and Caduceus as they work, no matter how skilled they are. She does something that lifts some of the weight of exhaustion from him, and it reminds him of how tired he is, still, even with the careful wash of their healing through his aching bones. His eyelids droop, and he sways where he sits. Around him, the room spins. They keep him steady and help him back into the shirt. There is relief in that, too, in having whole cloth between his body and the world and the eyes of his friends. Gently, Caduceus lays him back down on the bedroll. It is a thin covering on a hard floor, and yet it is the most comfortable thing Essek has felt in what feels like months. A feather bed could not feel more inviting, he is sure, with the way that tiredness yawns like a gaping mouth at the moment his head touches the bedroll's makeshift pillow.
You sleep, Essek.
Caduceus tells him, dropping another one of those deadening calm spells over him, like a heavy blanket.
We'll all be here.
This time, he does not fight it. He sinks fast and deep into the dragging, inevitable darkness. Oh my heckin' gosh, you guys, thank you for listening. Please leave a like, a comment, subscribe to the channel, or I guess if you're an AO3, leave some kudos. We work really hard on this. Our voice actors are dope. Go check us out, Rewind and Replay. We do a bunch of other cool stuff like tabletop games and a gaming podcast. Love you. Stay tuned in 2 weeks for Chapter 5, the thrilling conclusion.